I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there, Price of Reason here with a special report. Ever since the airing of the recent Doctor Who specials with David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa, it's become clear that the Doctor Who franchise is heading for disaster. Again. And this is a real problem since Doctor Who was already severely damaged during the highly unpopular, overly political Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall era, which brought the show's viewership ratings to an all-time low. When the specials were announced in 2021, some Doctor Who fans had hoped that the return of Russel T Davies as franchise showrunner and David Tennant's return for 3 specials would help revive and course-correct the long-running franchise. But now that all 4 Doctor Who specials have aired, including a Christmas special with actor Ncuti Gatwa taking over the role of the Doctor, one thing is clear. Not only has returning showrunner Russel T Davies not saved the franchise, with the help of the BBC and its new partner Disney, Davies has actually given the franchise a final blow. In this video, I'm going to be investigating what led Russel T Davies to betray Doctor Who fans, exactly how, when, and why Davies had transitioned from Doctor Who savior to Doctor Who villain. And I hope you're sitting down for this one because I'm going to be discussing some exclusive information here, and if you're into that sort of thing, please make sure to also like and subscribe. Now, when it comes to the BBC, it doesn't really surprise anybody that Doctor Who would continue to push divisive identity politics, because it's kind of their thing. In fact, after receiving complaints recently from viewers about a new teenage character introduced in the Doctor Who specials that's more than meets the eye, the BBC have even released a statement saying that they support the character's inclusion because they think it's important for Doctor Who to reflect the world that we live in. And if that phrase sounds familiar to you, it's word for word what Amazon had also said about their billion-dollar failure, Lord of the Rings: Rings of Power. And similar language has also been used in recent years by people involved in the Disney Marvel franchise as well. Speaking of Disney, it has also been confirmed that as a new distributor and financial backer of Doctor Who, they actually do have creative input over the show itself and could potentially have a say about its messaging too. In any case, while the messaging that has appeared in the recent Doctor Who specials is on brand for both the BBC and Disney, it's actually showrunner Russel T Davies that has disappointed me the most. Due to his successful revival of the Doctor Who franchise in 2005, it's still hard to believe that a competent writer-producer like Davies, that had seemingly cared about the Doctor Who franchise in the past, would be so eager to disregard the franchise's legacy and even his own past contributions to it in order to push such divisive agendas and ideologies. And even worse, not only has Davies not erased or fixed previous showrunner Chris Chibnall's mistakes, Davies has actually doubled down on them. In order to try to understand how Davies could possibly have turned his back on Doctor Who fans this way, I reached out to independent journalist John the White, known for his expertise on the Doctor Who franchise, and he had some very interesting information. According to John, he believes that at least some of the problems we're seeing now with Doctor Who, especially with Davies, actually originated somewhere in the 1990s. It was during that time that a group of TV industry professionals had plotted to jointly take creative control over every aspect of the Doctor Who franchise and shape it exactly the way they had wanted. This tight-knit crew, known to some as the Fitzroy Club, included all of the future Doctor Who revival showrunners to date: Russel T Davies, Stephen Moffat, and Chris Chibnall, as well as future writer-producers of Doctor Who audio stories, Paul Cornell, Rob Shearman, and Nicholas Briggs, who would also later work on the revived TV series with their good friends. And apparently the reason this crew of industry professionals was known as the Fitzroy Club was because during the 90s, they were regulars at a pub in London called the Fitzroy Tavern. John the White believes, and I quote, "It's basically how Russel T Davies, Stephen Moffat, and Chris Chibnall turned Doctor Who into a monopoly that they control, and it's a creative closed shop as a result." Now, as much as I found this information intriguing, I wanted to see if any of these people have ever officially acknowledged the Fitzroy Club ever even existing. And while there was very little official info about it online, I did find a very interesting fluff piece, first published in The Guardian in June 2014, that mentions that Russel T Davies, Stephen Moffat, Paul Cornell, Rob Shearman, and Nicholas Briggs would all regularly visit this Fitzroy Tavern before running Doctor Who, as it was quote-unquote the center of Doctor Who fandom for more than 30 years. Now, since it's highly unlikely that for 30 years all of Doctor Who's millions of fans from all over the world filled this tavern, which looks like it holds about 100 people, I found this description odd. When I asked John the White about it, he told me that as a longtime fan, this was never a location that he went to or even heard about others going to. That's not to say that a select group of local fans never met up there, but it's reasonable to say that this article's description of the Fitzroy Tavern as the center of Doctor Who fandom seems, if nothing else, rather inaccurate. Without going into too much of a detour here, I believe that the reason that this 2014 article was written at the time was perhaps to preemptively run interference with any potential criticism about not letting new creative people into the fold, and that the Doctor Who franchise was just a group of old mates scratching each other's, backs? This might explain why then Doctor Who's showrunner Stephen Moffat himself interviews for this article, and maybe also why the article never refers to the group as the Fitzroy Club. Instead, it seemingly paints a more innocent picture, where these guys were all just passionate fans that happened to be hanging out with many other passionate fans at a pub. Especially future Doctor Who writer Paul Cornell, who in this article says that there were so many Doctor Who fans at the Fitzroy Tavern that, and I quote, "The fans were snuggled like a pile of meerkats in the cul-de-sac by the dartboard. It's the only building in which I've ever snogged a bloke. It seemed like the thing to do. How yay that fandom was is something that's being lost in the midst of time." Now, this odd comment from Paul Cornell really got me thinking. Is this how members of the Fitzroy Club have always viewed the Doctor Who fandom? Could it be that all the blunt messaging we're seeing today on Doctor Who was always part of Russel T Davies' endgame? Was he always looking to make the show more agenda-driven rather than story-driven? According to John the White, back in the day, Davies and the other members of the Fitzroy Club may have wanted to put in some light messaging like this, but they also knew that the show needed to target a more mainstream audience, so they could never overdo it. However, according to John, it was after a book called Doctor Who and Release had been published in 2013, where the franchise was criticized by activists/writers for not being diverse and inclusive, that the BBC had seemed shaken to its core and immediately wanted to see more quote-unquote progressive changes implemented in the Doctor Who franchise. This new directive, according to John, was not always met with the same measure of enthusiasm from all members of the Fitzroy Club. While Chris Chibnall seemed fully on board with this direction, Stephen Moffat was not as excited to push agendas, ultimately causing him to get pushed aside. But over the past few years, according to John, and I quote, "The biggest convert of the Church of Wokery is Russel T Davies. He no longer cares about the Doctor Who franchise or the fans, just the cause. It's exactly why he wouldn't retcon Chris Chibnall's mistakes out of existence, for fear of upsetting the woke crowd and of being viewed as old and irrelevant. And to me, this actually makes perfect sense now. Russel T Davies' return to Doctor Who was never about fixing the franchise. It was simply to join the BBC and Disney on their quest to use it as a platform. He's fully and enthusiastically on board, and personally, I would argue that perhaps deep down inside, this is in fact what Russel T Davies has always wanted, even during his days of plotting a franchise takeover with the Fitzroy Club at the Fitzroy Tavern in the 90s. And these days, unlike during his first tenure as Doctor Who's showrunner, nobody is holding him back anymore. Disney and the BBC have stated on multiple occasions that they fully support Russel T Davies' bold vision for Doctor Who moving forward, and the fact that even they think his agenda peddling seems bold is probably not a good sign. And this leaves many Doctor Who fans like myself in sort of an Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker situation.
It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
But I don't see any type of Return of the Jedi redemption coming from Davies. No matter what good things he's done in the past, Davies has tarnished his own reputation, and his betrayal of fans will always be a part of his legacy. But if it's any consolation to you all, the BBC, Disney, and Russel T Davies will likely have to face the music at some point, as I can't imagine that the viewership numbers for this show won't continue to decline. According to new Doctor Who actress Millie Gibson, the show is going to be even more controversial moving forward because it wants to appeal to a Gen Z audience, but since Gen Z mostly watches people shaving pans on TikTok, this plan is also likely to fail. Just like Disney Star Wars, just like Kurtzman Trek, just like any other IP that has been sacrificed by activists over the past 7 years. Now, for those of you that have made it this far, thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me. I know it was a bit more investigative than some of my other videos, but if you like these type of exclusive investigations, let me know in the comments, and please consider subscribing to my channel and also clicking on that wonderful notification bell. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.